The mansion was enormous. Walls lined with gold-framed portraits, chandeliers that shimmered like captured stars, and silence so thick it could swallow secrets whole. When Isabella stepped through those grand double doors for the first time, clutching her cleaning gloves and the letter of employment, she didn't know that by the end of the week her entire world would unravel. She had taken the job out of desperation. Her little daughter Emma was sick and the hospital bills were suffocating her. She needed the money no matter the cost. But the moment she looked up and saw him, the men from her past, immortalized in a portrait hanging proudly in the great hall, her breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled, her world tilted. The man in the painting was the father of her child. Before you dive deeper into this emotional story of love, betrayal, and fate, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent Stories if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, and second chances. Your support helps us share more stories that touch hearts and remind us of the power of humanity. Isabella's new employer, Mrs. Eleanor Grant, was a woman of quiet authority, elegant, cold, and always in control. Her late husband had built the Grant estate, one of the largest in the city. The walls whispered stories of wealth, family, and pride. Isabella was assigned to the West Wing, where she cleaned the old library and dining rooms. She worked silently, respectfully, and tirelessly, hoping to stay unnoticed. But her eyes were always drawn to that one portrait, the one that haunted her heart. The man in the painting wore a dark suit and a gentle expression, his blue eyes both kind and distant. He looked exactly as she remembered him, Alexander, the man who had once promised her forever before vanishing from her life without a word. 5 years ago, Isabella was a young woman from a small town, working in a bakery and dreaming of a simple, happy life. Alexander had entered her world like sunlight breaking through clouds. He wasn't dressed like the locals. He carried an air of refinement and mystery. He told her he was just a traveler passing through, but he kept coming back every morning for coffee, every evening for conversation. Weeks turned into months, and before long, Isabella had fallen deeply in love. When she told him she was pregnant, his face turned pale. He held her, whispered promises, and said he would return after settling something important. But he never did. Days turned to weeks, and then into years, no calls, no letters, only silence. Isabella gave birth alone, raised Emma alone, and carried the pain like a shadow. Now standing in the Grant mansion, staring at that familiar face framed in gold, she realized the truth was far darker than she'd ever imagined. Alexander wasn't a simple traveler. He was a Grant, and the portrait was proof he belonged to this house, to this family, to the woman who now signed Isabella's paychecks. The thought made her knees weak. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she couldn't risk her job. Emma's hospital bills depended on her, so she stayed silent. She cleaned floors, polished silver, and tried to ignore the eyes of the men who had once loved her watching from the wall. Days passed in agonizing quiet until one afternoon, Mrs. Grant asked Isabella to dust the portraits in the main hall. Her heart pounded as she approached Alexander's painting. She reached out to wipe the frame, her yellow gloved hand trembling. "He was a fine man, Mrs." Grant's voice said from behind her. Isabella froze. "My son," the older woman continued softly. "He died 5 years ago in a car accident. Such a tragedy." Isabella's world spun. 5 years ago, that was when Alexander disappeared. That was when she'd given birth to Emma. Her vision blurred with tears. The truth hit like lightning. He hadn't abandoned her. He had died. All those years of anger, resentment, and loneliness had been built on a misunderstanding. Her knees buckled, and she held the edge of the frame for support. Mrs. Grant looked at her, puzzled. "Are you all right, dear?" The words burst out of Isabella before she could stop them. "Ma'am, why is the father of my daughter in your portrait?" The room fell silent. The older woman's face drained of color as her eyes flicked between Isabella and the portrait. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Mrs. Grant whispered almost in disbelief, "Your daughter?" Isabella nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Her name is Emma. She's 5. She looks just like him." Eleanor Grant's lips trembled as she stepped back, clutching her pearls. She stared at Isabella, her mind racing through the impossible truth. Alexander had never told her anything. He had died suddenly, and the family never knew he had loved someone or that he had a child. The silence in the hall was deafening, broken only by the sound of Isabella's quiet sobs. Mrs. Grant asked Isabella to sit. They moved to the parlor where sunlight streamed through tall windows. Isabella told her everything: how she met Alexander, how he vanished, how she struggled to raise Emma alone. With every word, Mrs. Grant's expression softened. Her heart broke anew, not just for her lost son, but for the innocent woman and child left behind by fate. She reached for Isabella's hand, her voice trembling. "My dear, if what you say is true, then your daughter, she's my granddaughter." For the first time in years, Isabella saw tears glisten in the eyes of another person who missed Alexander as much as she did. They sat in silence, united by grief, love, and the ghost of a man who had connected they. Our worlds. In the days that followed, Mrs. Grant asked to meet Emma. Isabella hesitated. She feared judgment, rejection, or the loss of control over the only family she had left. But when Mrs. Grant met Emma for the first time, everything changed. The little girl, with her bright blue eyes and innocent smile, ran into her grandmother's arms as if guided by destiny. The sight melted every wall around Eleanor's heart. She wept openly, holding the child close, whispering, "You have his eyes, my love." From that day on, the mansion that once felt cold and distant became a home filled with laughter again. Mrs. Grant helped pay for Emma's medical treatments, enrolled her in a good school, and made sure Isabella never had to struggle alone again. The older woman told her, "You're part of this family now, Isabella. Alexander loved you, and he would want you both cared for." Isabella, overwhelmed with gratitude, could only cry and whisper, "Thank you." She had spent years hating the world for taking away her happiness, not realizing that love had only been waiting to return in another form. The mansion's halls that once echoed with silence now rang with the sound of Emma's giggles and the aroma of Isabella's home-cooked meals. The portrait of Alexander still hung in its place, but now it wasn't just a reminder of loss. It was a symbol of connection. Every time Isabella passed it, she smiled softly and whispered, "We're okay now. She's safe." Life had come full circle. The woman who had once entered the mansion as a servant had found not just a home but a family. The cold walls had witnessed tears, forgiveness, and the healing power of love. Fate had been cruel, but it had also been kind enough to bring them back together through truth. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Silent Stories. Your support helps us keep telling stories that remind us of the beauty and second chances and the strength of love that never fades. Special request: before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe fate always finds a way to reunite hearts that are meant to be together? And as the evening sun bathed the Grant mansion in golden light, Isabella stood beside Mrs. Grant and Emma, her heart finally at peace. For the first time in years, she looked at the portrait on the wall and smiled, not in sorrow, but in gratitude. Because sometimes the greatest miracles begin with the simplest question. "Ma'am, why is my daughter's father in the portrait in your mansion?"